So the top 10 duos in my life. You will see, or I should share in advance, that I did not include folks like Mick and Keith, or John and Paul, or Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm. Some others I'm not thinking, Bruce and Steve Van Zandt. I tried to keep it to like true, not Simon and Garfunkel duos, but where I consider them really the two main people in the band. And some will see this and say, that's ridiculous. How can you include so-and-so, but not Paul and John? And I agree. So it's really just the ones that have had the biggest impression on me in my life. So from 10 to 1, to start, I talk about these guys all the time. My teenage years, high school years, Eric B. and Rakim. My introduction to hip hop, it may have been Eric B. and Rakim. I've shared a million of these stories, but I was super into basketball when I was young, and my buddy Dan, I went to high school with. There were two towns that went to my high school, but in grade school we did not go to school with that other town. So I met my buddy Dan, who I still talk to, early, maybe freshman year, maybe 8th grade, sort of like getting ready for high school, I was about to say college. Dan introduced me to early hip hop, and I was, for 3 years, or 2 or 3 years, it's all I listened to, it's a lot of what I listened to. Eric B. and Rakim, Public Enemy had a huge influence on me. Big Daddy Kane, I've mentioned. It's really a lot of the early, sort of the expected early giants of hip hop. But I remember I had this and paid, this is Follow the Leader. I had this and paid in full on cassette and wore both out, so I needed to buy them again. At least that's my recollection. But Follow the Leader, Microphone Fiend, just loved these guys. Had them on cassette, CD, and then in the last few years I bought the vinyl records, as well as a box set that recently came out. Number 9, these two guys, Will Oldham and Bonnie Prince Billy. Will Oldham as Bonnie Prince Billy, or Will Oldham, and Matt Sweeney. Matt Sweeney is becoming one of my favorite musicians, or one of my favorite guitar players in the world. He is in the new sort of indie rock supergroup, the Hard Quartet, which is, I know Stephen Malkmus is in that, Matt Sweeney, the guy from the Cairo Gang, and Jim White, I think is the drummer. I don't know if I have that name right. So this, I saw, Bonnie Prince Billy is just like gradually become one of my favorite artists. And put them together with Matt Sweeney. They have 2 records. I don't know why I keep flipping this. They have 2 records under the name Super Wolves. They're both great. I think they are very, very close friends. And their voice, I saw the Super Wolves on this tour. This is it just called Super Wolves? I thought they said a name. I saw them on this tour in San Francisco, and it was incredible. One of the better shows I've seen in the last 10 years. So check out the Hard Quartet. Their first record, I think, comes out October 4th. Is it on Drag City? Maybe Matador? Cannot wait for that. I've heard they have a video out, and it sort of mirrors the Stones video. What's the Stones video when they're sort of walking through Manhattan? It's sort of a spoof on that. It's classic. Can't wait for that. Don and Phil Everly, do I have that right? Are those their names? Which is ridiculous if I have them at number 8, that I don't remember their names. I'm almost positive it's Don and Phil. The Everly Brothers. So this I was raised on. My mom loved the Everly Brothers, still does. Played them all the time growing up in New Jersey. In our kitchen, I remember we had a stereo in the living room, like one of those big box stereos that you put in the glass. And my mom would play CBS 101.9 or 5. Mom, if you're watching this, maybe you can correct me in the comments. But she would play the oldies station, and it was like Everly Brothers, Buddy Holly, Sam Cooke, just really, really great stuff that I got turned on to at a very young age. I've talked about how when I spent my time, my brother and I would go to our father's house, it was a lot of Springsteen, Dylan, Bob Seger, Fleetwood Mac, Beatles. My mom was like more oldies, and the Everly Brothers. I remember I walked into, if any of you remember Other Music, great record store in Manhattan. I think it closed maybe 10 years ago. Very like high fidelity, but even snootier. Like whenever I walked into Other Music, I was like, oh God, I gotta pick the right record to look cool. It just had a vibe. And I remember I walked in and they were playing an Everly Brothers compilation. It was like the Atlantic Years or something, like whatever major label they were on. I don't know if they were on multiple, but and I remember just being like, this music is incredible, and this takes me right. But I didn't know it was the Everly Brothers at first, so I ended up buying the double CD, which I still have. It's lying around here somewhere. And I remember calling my mom and just saying, I'm getting back into the Everly Brothers. So huge influence on me as a young kid and even later on. At number 7, Donald Fagan and Walter Becker as Steely Dan. Huge record. This record especially, Can't Buy a Thrill, was a monster record for me in high school, college. I still listen to it pretty regularly. My high school yearbook quote was from the song Midnight Cruiser. It was from Midnight Cruiser, as well as we had two. You had the one in the back and then one under your picture. Midnight Cruiser, I can't remember the quote. And then in the back was Someday We'll Look Back on This and It Will All Seem Funny, from Rosalita Springsteen. It's a pretty good one, right? Steely Dan, I've gotten into them in the past 5 years again, buying all the UHQRs that come out, and just love them. Saw them once with Lane, tremendous show at the Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey. At number 6, Alex Chilton and Chris Bell. I would argue that Big Star might be the greatest American band. Creedence, Beach Boys, Nirvana, Wilco's got to be up there, The Replacements. There's a million that I'm not thinking of right now. But Big Star, and I know that people will say, well, they just did one record together. But it was this one, and this sort of set off Big Star. This record is a 10.0. I think all three of their records are 10.0s. Maybe Radio City is a slight nudge below. But third, or Sisters Lovers, is that what they call the third one? That's a 10 as well. One of my favorite bands ever. I listen to them all the time. Lane turned me on to them. I had no idea who they were. I have all of Chris Bell's stuff. I have a ton of Alex Chilton records. Just absolutely love Big Star. Number 5, I'm using a CD because they only, as far as I know, they only have one record on vinyl. It's not one of their best, but this is one of their best. This is probably their 5th best. The Gourds from Austin, Texas. Kevin Russell and Jimmy Smith. Kevin Russell now tours as Shiny Ribs. Jimmy Smith, I believe, lives in Montana and plays locally. This might be the most underrated band ever. Listen to, this is Bolsa de Agua, I think it's called, yeah. But their best records are their first few. Stadium Blitzer, I think, is their best. That's I think a 10.0. Dem's Good Beeble is their first. They had a little bit of fame because they covered Gin and Juice by Snoop Dogg, which apparently the story is when it first went up on Napster, it was listed as Fish, the band Fish. So like millions of people discovered it, and then it got corrected and people had to realize that they were listening to the Gourds, a band that most of these people had never heard of, and not Fish. I think there's some story about that. One of the greatest live bands ever. There's rumblings that maybe they'll get back together someday. I would fly across the country to see these guys. Jimmy Smith and Kevin Russell, unbelievable duo. They could have easily been number 1. Number 4, Gary Loris and Mark Olson, the Jayhawks. This is their 2nd record. I think Bunkhouse was the first, which was sort of came out later. I don't think there was an official release when it first came out, which is in like 1986. I think this is 89. Blue Earth. So they played together through from Bunkhouse, Blue Earth, Hollywood Town Hall, which is a 10.0, Tomorrow the Green Grass, which is like a 9.8. Then they got back together again later, and then they separated again. I am seeing the Jayhawks in a few weeks. Of course, Mark Olson is no longer in the band, but still a great band. In terms of harmonies, you know, the Everly Brothers are right up there, but in terms of number one harmonies, it might be Olson and Loris for me. At number 3, Richard and Linda Thompson. All of these in the top 5, 6, 7 could all be number 1. This is Pour Down Like Silver, one of the many great. There's Linda Thompson, there's Richard Thompson, one of the greatest duos ever. Listen to anything by them, it's incredible, everything you hear. This is one of their more underrated records. And if my memory is right, and I may have mentioned this before, but I interned at Bar None Records in 1995, before I even graduated from college. And I remember I worked on Edwyn Collins, a little bit of Freddie Johnson. I think he had already departed and gone to Elektra. The Health and Happiness Show, which a lot of bands, Yola Tango, but Yola Tango had moved on. But their record, Fake Book, on Bar None was just tremendous. But Bar None, I've told the story. I just called them from my bedroom because I was listening to a Freddie Johnson record, and I asked if they wanted interns, and they said, sure, come in tomorrow. And I was like, for an interview? And they're like, no, you can start. And I did. And I spent the summer driving from my hometown in New Jersey to Hoboken every day. And the point of that is, I remember I would do a lot of magazine work, like make sure that magazines got their records, ship them out to radio stations. It was all on CD at the time. And I remember I was reading an interview with Jeff Tweety, and he mentioned this. I think he said it was his favorite record of all time at the time. It was definitely in his top 10. Jeff, I know you watch these. I'm kidding. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. Speaking of Jeff Tweety, at number 2 would be Jeff Tweety and Jay Bennett. Now, this is one where people will say, well, what about John Sturrett and Ken Coomer and Bobby Egan and Max Johnston? I know, but like Tweety and Bennett did a lot of shows, just the two of them together. And they were there they are, right? There's Tweety. I think this is like at a DMV. There's Bennett. My dog was named Bennett after Jay Bennett. Changed my life. Wilco, probably the most important band in my life. Either them or Springsteen and the E Street Band, but it's probably Wilco. So why aren't they number 1? Well, that's because Tweety and Ferrar come in at number 1. This is their debut, 1990s No Depression. Incredible 4-record run. They were together, I believe, from 1987 to 1994. They were previously called the Plebes. I think that was one of their names. And there was another name that's escaping me. I've said it a million times, I don't need to say it again, changed my life. Just like Wilco and all these records sort of changed my life. But this one, when I discovered them in 1994, it was everything. I discovered them right after a friend of mine's friend from Maine came down to Boston, where I was in school at the time, and saw them, invited me. I turned it down because I'd never heard of them. Went to another show on campus. It was like something I wasn't interested in. And then that gentleman who went to the show played the record Anodyne for us the next day, and that was it. Changed everything. I work in music today and have for 25 years because of that morning when I heard Anodyne. I remember he played New Madrid first. Jay Ferrar and Jeff Tweedy, I think, should go down as one of the greatest duos ever. Uncle Tupelo is still so underappreciated. Just an unbelievable catalog. Again, I never got to see them live, but I've seen their offshoots now, Wilco and Sumble, probably combined more than 100 times, 80 times. Golden Smog and everything that is tied to these bands. Max Johnston went on to be in the Gourds. Just on a life-changing record and a life-changing band. And without a doubt, my favorite duo of all time. Jay Ferrar, who now leads Sunvolt, puts out some solo records. Jeff Tweety, who now leads Wilco, and he's in a ton of different projects. He was in Golden Smog, Loose Fur. He does the Tweety record. He did a Tweety record with his son, and he does the Jeff Tweety solo records. But they were at Jeff Tweety and Jay Ferrar, sort of huge impact on my siblings and my relationships. My brother John and my brother Lane. Uncle Tupelo, Jay and Jeff, thanks for all the music, and thanks to all these guys. I'm going for a drive. I was supposed to go see ELO tonight, but I've been sick all week. Not COVID. I think I've had COVID 4 times, either 3 or 4 times. 3 positive different tests, and 1 right when COVID started. I came back from New York the week before. It was in late February of 2020. I came back and got really sick. This is before they were testing or anything. But this, I've tested a bunch of times, not COVID, because I had COVID about 6 weeks ago. I went to a work event in Kansas City 2 weeks ago, and like everyone, or a lot of the people got sick. I don't know if it's COVID. I think it's just like a flu. This is the first day in almost a week where I feel a little bit more normal. Not as exhausted, still blowing my nose all the time. But I'm going to miss ELO tonight, which is such a drag. I was looking so forward to this show. Never seen them, and I just really hope they come back again. Hope you enjoyed this video. More to come soon. Take care.